Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning was released in 2006, was directed by Johnathan Liebesman, and stars Jordana Brewster, Ermey, and Andrew Barnardsky. It follows the story of two brothers and their girlfriends who gets into a car accident and is then hauled off to the secluded house where they run into a chainsaw-wielding killer and his family. Welcome back, guys, to my Texas Chainsaw Massacre film review series. If you have not watched them yet, I've reviewed all of them up to this point, so I'll have them in the link below. We've only got a couple of them until lead up to the new one, which starts streaming on Netflix February 18th, followed by a ranking. So stay tuned for that. And I don't think I've stated enough on this channel, but I'm not really the biggest fan of prequels. I never really have been the biggest fan of the whole how it started thing. You know, especially if they don't finish up what they've already started. So I've never really been a fan of it. But in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, I actually was pretty satisfied. But however, there's a downfall with that. So before I get into all that, let's get into the positives of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. This film was the most brutal, the most grittiest, goriest one out of them all. Even the ones that followed after this, I've always considered this one as the most all bets are off film of the franchise. Sure, Texas Chainsaw, the one that followed after this, had its moments, but at the beginning really held nothing back. I've said this before, these adaptations have always been my most favorite. The 2003 remake and of course the beginning. Because the way Leatherface is presented in this, the guy that they got to play him, it's like next to Gunnar Hansen, I've never seen anybody play this part as perfectly as Andrew did. And I'm not going to pronounce his name again because, again, y'all look it up for yourself. But the way this guy portrayed him, that's mostly the reason why I like these adaptions. And I really wish it would have had a continuance, whether it's a sequel to the 2003 version or something more that they could have done with this one. I just really wish they would have continued it in some capacity. But with TCM at the beginning, all bets were off. Like I said, all bets were all off. And as I said, the guy that they got to play Leatherface in the 2003 remake, he does return. And the way he plays it off, it's just so brutal. I mean, I thought he was brutal in the 2003 remake, but in this one, he holds nothing back. I really wish they would have got him into doing the rest of these movies, no matter what the story revolved around. He played it with such depth, such understanding of this character.
Get that thing going! Let's go, Tommy! Come on! Crank it up! Let's go! Let it at it, asshole!
As I said, I would have loved to see this interpretation of the character to further out in more movies. I mean, unfortunately it didn't work out like that. But the ones we got of the 03 remake and this, of this universe basically, is just priceless to me. And it's just as closest to the character of Leatherface that I really wanted, that I really enjoyed. Again, I'm not downing the others. I'm looking at you, part 4. But I am totally satisfied with how this guy played this character. I really wish he would have continued it. And again, like I said in the 2003 remake review, I've got to mention Ermey. Unlike the 2003 remake, he had his moments. He really did shine, but he shined the most in the beginning. To me, they really made him out to be the villain, the main villain next to Leatherface. The top dog that basically kidnaps these kids after they get into this car accident and just holds them hostage and tortures them, beats them up. You'd think he was the mastermind of this. I mean, there's even a scene in there where one of the family members actually pulls him aside and says, "You have made a grave mistake. Boy, are you dumb." And that was pretty funny to me. Like the way Ermey's character retaliated back at that, saying, "Nobody's going to miss those creatures, not one bit, not now and not when they gone." And, you know, it's just the psychosis of this man. It was just far out there, but just enough to be very satisfying for the type of character he was playing. To me, after watching the beginning, I really do think that his character was watered down in the 2003 remake. Now, I know there's a 3-year difference in between the remake and this one, but there's just so much that they gave him to do. especially compared to the '03 remake. He was the top dog at this film. I really do believe that they wrote this character to the start of him being the main villain.
Glad you're here, officer.
Oh, I just bet you are.
Again, he really shined, and he really impressed me in this one. And I gotta mention Jordana Brewster. Though she wasn't as charismatic, she didn't match up Jessica Biel, but she was good as the main character. Now, I can't say that she's the final girl because this is a prequel. And for most of you who've seen this, you already know, unfortunately, how it ends for her, but she still played pretty well as a main character. And I like the character development between her and her boyfriend. Like, they were talking about how many kids they want and what their names was and this and that, and it really built up you caring for these characters. Just the all-out love they had for each other, and especially after what happened to them in the aftermath, it really made you feel for these characters. It made me feel for them characters. I can't speak for all of y'all, but it did me. As I mentioned before, this one's the goriest one of them all. And like I said, the way that Leatherface, the guy that played Leatherface, betrayed this character of Leatherface, he held nothing back. And there was a bunch of chainsawing on people that just shocked me to the core. Especially the first few times that I watched this. Now, like a billion views later, it still kind of gets to me. Like I said, this one was the most brutalist, the most goriest, and grittiest one yet. Again, I know I'm rambling on this, but I just wish they would have continued this in some capacity, whether it was a sequel to the '03 remake or a sequel to the beginning. I don't care. I wish I would have seen more out of this. But they had plenty of carnage candy. It didn't really start up until like maybe in the second act is when this biker came to try to find his girlfriend, the girl that was shot at the beginning, and he actually holds Ermey up at gunpoint. And like he starts calling for Thomas, which is actually Leatherface's name in this one. He starts calling for him, calling for help. And this and that, when they get to that room where that other girl's tied up, which is obviously not the girl that this biker was looking for, he realizes that and he's about to shoot him. And then Leatherface just lunges at him, makes him fall on the chainsaw, and then just saws him in half. Just holds nothing back. When I saw that, it was just something that I really wanted to see in a TCM film. Just the depths of that scene alone. And then him coming down and sawing the girl's boyfriend in half. And I mean, it didn't show much, but it did show a lot of blood dripping down when the girl, Jordana Brewster's character, was underneath the table where all this was happening. You could just see the emotion on her face. It's just priceless. Director Johnathan Liebesman takes over the directing job of this film, and I gotta say, this is the first film that I've actually seen of him. I'm not really sure what else he did before this, prior to this, but he's a pretty good director. It's a funny story. This is actually one of Michael Bay's productions. It's not done by him, but it's done from his production company, Platinum Dunes. So basically, I don't know what occurred or what brought this on, but Johnathan Liebesman was about to leave the project. He was about to throw in the towel in the middle of production. I don't know if it was conflict with the actors or studio, but thankfully Michael Bay talked him into staying, and I'm glad he did. But that just shows like how much trust Michael Bay, one of the greatest action directors of the 90s at least. I don't know, everybody's saying that his movies are a lot bad-tized, but I never really have a problem with his films, Michael Bay's. But someone like Michael Bay, to actually ask someone to stay on as director, that's saying a lot. And I'm glad that he talked Johnathan Liebesman into staying as director, because I really did like the way he directed this film, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, at the beginning. I just felt like he was very well respectful of the material. And I said this about the '03 remake. The surrounding was once again great. You have this house in the middle of nowhere, and it shows a lot of what it showed in the remake. Because this is a prequel, certain things was missing. But the surrounding was great. You still had that same house from the 2003 remake out in the middle of nowhere. It was like a deserted, kind of like a desert, like no one else is around. And that really spoke volumes with me. The Hewitt family, which is the psychotic, cannibalistic family that you find in these, was done really well. It's the best I've seen in a while, even better than the original. Now, don't all castrate at me at once, but I even thought that the family in this film was portrayed a lot better than the original, or than any of the others that I've seen. 1,000 times better than The Next Generation. You just see all the disturbed ways that this family is. Like with the dinner scene, when after Jordana Brewster character tells them off, she, lays it down really bluntly. And then one of the family members is like, I will not have you speak ill of this family, when you got body parts and blood in a bowl that you're getting ready to eat. That's what really intrigued me. And also, and I won't harp on this too much because I've already said my piece about it enough earlier, but going back about the R. Lee Ermey character and how iconic and hardcore he was in this, if you notice in the 2003 remake, he was so mellow. He wasn't as hardcore and rough in that one as he was in this. But again, there's a 4-year gap, and this is how my mind works. This is how my own logic base works in my own brain. But if you look at all the things that these characters went through in this, I'm just speaking about R. Lee Ermey, is the fact that he went so hardcore, I think he kind of exhausted himself a little bit. And even though that there was a 4-year difference, he wasn't as hardcore with the kids in the 2003 remake, which happened 4 years after the events of this, as he was in this one, to the kids in this one. Jordana Brewster's character and all them. He wasn't as hardcore with Jessica Biel's character in like the 4-year gap in between. So that's my own logic. Like everything that happened, and same with Uncle Monty, which I'll get to here in a minute. He was such a grouch 4 years after the events of this one. But he was so mellow in this one. So it just affected the characters in a way to where I think that just the events, it just all comes down to the events. And again, that's just how my own little logic brain works. So that was kind of interesting to me, and something I felt like I had to bring up. Which again leads me to the Uncle Monty character. I brought this up in the 2003 remake review. He was this grouchy, very unpleasant old man that had a very nasty temper about him in the 03 remake. Well, in this one, I noticed there's a big change, and I think this befalls on a lot of what happens to him. You see how he loses his legs. So anybody that goes through that trauma, I'm pretty sure you'll have bad PTSD and a really bad attitude. But in this, he was very mellow. There's even a scene where he walks in, and the brothers, when they're tied up by R. Lee Ermey's character, and they're pleading with him, please help us, help us. And then he's like, oh, I don't get involved in his affairs. No, and then he just walks away. He's the guy that would like clean up after like the accidents on the roads and this and that. Point being, he was so mellow. He was such a different character in this. But again, you get to find out why he lost his legs, why he didn't have any legs in the 03 remake, because again, prequel. And after going through something like that, I would imagine that's probably why they wrote the character the way they did in this. That's much different in the 03 remake. And I thought that was a pretty nice touch. It's just a total difference, especially in between these two characters with R. Lee Ermey and the Uncle Monty character, where Uncle Monty was just a mean old grouch in the 2003 remake 4 years after the events of this one, but he was mellow in this one. Okay, R. Lee Ermey was mellow in the 2003 remake, but not as mellow in this one, if you catch my drift. Again, like I said in the 3, even though I'm still labeling this family better than that family in 3. But like I said in 3, everything that this family in the beginning did acted like everything was normal. And that's what the very real scary part about this was. The beginning is the best in the franchise that I've seen yet. It's definitely one on up on the food chain. It's definitely the best in the franchise that I've seen. Even though I've never really been a huge fan of prequels, this still holds up as one of the best in the franchise in my eyes. Even though I've never really been that huge of a prequel fan, let's dive into the mixed. This never really felt like a prequel. And the reason why this is in the mix is, yes, I'm not that big of a fan of the prequel scenario, but the reason why this is in the mix is because it never really felt like a prequel, but you have like certain things. Now, I'm not saying that I don't like prequels completely. It's just depending on how they go about it. But in this, it never really felt like a prequel sense. Yes, it's set like 4 years before the '03 remake. The '03 remake was set in '73. This is set in '69. But it never really felt like a prequel other than the beginning credit scene where like you have the beginning scene where the mother gives birth to Leatherface, and then you see the beginning credit scene where he's growing up and gets adopted by this lunatic family, and him growing up, killing animals, but you see it in like glimpses. It's not like in your face or anything. I would have preferred to see like a little bit more, maybe like 10 or 20 minutes of just a whole thing where it just shows him grow up, and more of that environment as what made him so disturbed. I mean, yeah, you get the gist of it, but I'd kind of like to see a little more. That would have made the prequel side to me a little more interesting. But you don't get that. And again, I'm still satisfied with what they laid out. Because in a way, I guess you didn't really need that extra footage. But if you just watch it in the beginning credit scene, like in this film, I guess that's satisfying to me enough. Because like I said, I've never really been that big of a fan of a prequel since. I just wish they would have shown more from what the '03 film showed. I wish it would have been set like a little closer, like maybe 1971 or 1972. And it would have showed like what happened to the hitchhiker that was at the beginning of the '03 version that blew her brains out. And all that, like leading up to that, it would have been cool to even see like a little cameo of Jessica Biel. Like right when the beginning storyline ends, you see her and her friends drive by. That would have been cool to see. But you don't get that, which is fine. Which leads us to the negatives. And I know I'm beating a dead horse on this, so I apologize in advance. But again, my logic brain is here at work. Going back to what I said about this being a prequel, so some things will be missing because there's a 4-year gap. There's still some things I still kind of wanted to see and get more of an explanation that the 2003 remake already set a precedent for. The woman that explained the skin disease that Leatherface had in the 2003 remake to Jessica Biel's character, it never shows her. Like, what was up with her? I think I heard something about her being the sister to Leatherface, but I can't be for certain. That's what I heard. And she was with this morbidly obese woman in this trailer park in the '03 remake. It shows the obese woman in the beginning, but not her. What gives? Plus this whole thing with Jedediah, with that little kid, he had to be like 7 or 8 or something like that. Maybe a little younger, so maybe this is a little bit of an exception, but they should have explained him as well. Like, was he actually a part of the family, or was he another kidnapped kid that they got, like, in between? Or, you know, was he a baby or something? Like, they could have at least showed him as a baby in this one. It's just little things like that, little quirks like that just kind of gets to me every now and then. Maybe little nitpicks. You take what you can get. But the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning is definitely worth your while. It's the most tense, impactful, grittiest, and bloodiest in my opinion. So if you're a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan and expect to see plenty of gore, you'll have a bloody good time. Just temper your expectations when it comes to the prequel side and put this on a pedestal. So the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, what was your thoughts on it? Did you like this adaptation? Did you like both of these adaptations? Did you like the way Leatherface was portrayed? Would you have liked the scene more in this universe like I have? Or was this not your favorite? Was this not your favorite adaptation? Do you think it was best to end it like they did? Leave me your comments down below and give me your thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, once again for watching this. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. And I will for sure see you on the next one. Peace.